They said Tombstone was already lost. They said the town belonged to men with guns, not men with badges, and that anyone foolish enough to challenge that reality would end up buried in the desert. They said the law had no place there, that fear had already won, and that order was nothing more than a memory from the East. But on a cold morning in October of 1881, a small group of Americans made a decision that would shake the frontier and echo through history. They chose to stand their ground, knowing full well that doing so might cost them their lives. Tombstone, Arizona territory, was not built slowly or carefully. It erupted into existence after the discovery of silver, transforming empty desert into one of the richest boomtowns in America almost overnight. In just a few years, it became a magnet for ambition. Miners arrived dreaming of fortune. Merchants followed, eager to sell supplies at any price. Gamblers and saloon owners filled the streets with noise, alcohol, and temptation. And wherever money moved fast, violence followed faster. Wooden buildings rose in haste. Laws lagged behind, and order struggled to take root in a town growing too quickly to control itself. By the early 1880s, Tombstone was living on borrowed time. Murders were frequent, but justice was rare. Witnesses disappeared or stayed silent, afraid of what would happen if they spoke. Threats were not whispered in dark alleys, but shouted openly across saloon floors in front of entire crowds. Men walked the streets armed and drunk, confident that no one would challenge them. Slowly, the town reached a dangerous conclusion. Fear worked better than the law. At the center of this chaos were the men known as the cowboys. Later generations would try to soften their image, turning them into symbols of freedom and rebellion. But in Tombstone, they were something else entirely. They were organized, violent, and deliberate. They stole cattle, robbed stagecoaches, intimidated voters, and enforced their power through threats and bloodshed. Ike Clanton and the McClory brothers were not isolated troublemakers. They were representatives of a way of life that rejected civilization and thrived on disorder. For the cowboys, Tombstone was perfect. A rich town with weak enforcement and citizens too afraid to fight back. The more fear spread, the stronger they became. And they made no effort to hide their contempt for the law. They carried weapons openly in violation of city ordinances, mocked the authorities in public, and issued threats without consequence. Each day that passed without resistance convinced them that the town was already theirs. Into this environment walked Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp was not chasing glory, and he was not searching for legend. By the time he arrived in Tombstone, his life had already been shaped by hardship, loss, and constant movement. He grew up on the edge of instability, following opportunity across the frontier, never staying long enough to feel secure. He worked many jobs, some legal, some questionable, all necessary to survive. He had served as a lawman before and understood exactly what that meant in places where the law was unwelcome. Wyatt did not romanticize violence. He had seen it too closely for that. He understood that every bullet fired left consequences behind, families broken, futures erased. What made Wyatt dangerous to his enemies was not aggression, but discipline. He believed that without order, no community could survive, that without law, fear would always rise to fill the void, and he believed that civilization only moves forward when someone is willing to defend it, even when doing so makes them a target. Wyatt was not alone. His brothers shared his belief, and in Tombstone that belief became a matter of survival. Virgil Earp, older and more burdened, served as the town marshal. Every day he pinned the badge to his chest, knowing it painted a mark on his back. One of the most controversial laws he enforced was simple: no firearms within town limits. It was not meant to disarm honest citizens forever, only to prevent sudden, drunken gunfights from tearing the town apart. To the cowboys, it was an insult, a direct challenge to their authority. Morgan Earp stood beside his brothers, quieter but no less committed. He understood that enforcing the law in Tombstone meant risking everything, not someday, but every single time he stepped outside. The badge was not a symbol of power. It was a responsibility that came with a heavy price. And then there was Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday was a man already living on borrowed time. Educated, articulate, and once respected as a dentist, he now survived as a gambler, coughing blood into handkerchiefs and knowing his days were numbered. Tuberculosis had stripped away any illusion of a long future. But what Doc lacked in physical strength, he made up for in loyalty. He believed in Wyatt Earp, believed in standing when others backed away, and because he had little left to lose, he was fearless in a way few men ever are. As the months passed, the tension in Tombstone grew unbearable. The cowboys became bolder with each challenge that went unanswered. They threatened the Earps directly, mocked them in public, and dared them to act. Saloons became stages for intimidation. Streets became arenas of silent standoffs. Many townspeople chose silence, hoping the storm would pass on its own. Others quietly supported the Earps, but were too afraid to say so aloud. Fear had become the town's strongest currency. Wyatt Earp understood something that many did not. Lawlessness does not disappear by itself. It grows. It tests boundaries. It spreads until someone stops it. And every day that passed without resistance made the eventual cost higher. By the fall of 1881, Tombstone had reached a breaking point. The cowboys no longer hid their defiance. They carried weapons openly, ignoring the law, daring the authorities to intervene. The message was clear. If the Earps would not act, no one would. And if no one acted, Tombstone would belong to fear forever. The stage was set. The lines were drawn. And the question facing Tombstone was no longer whether violence would come, but who would be willing to stand when it did. The morning of October 26, 1881, the town would get its answer. The morning of October 26, 1881 did not begin with gunfire. It began with tension so thick it felt heavier than the desert air itself. Tombstone woke up uneasy, as if the town somehow sensed that something irreversible was about to happen. Men spoke in lower voices. Shopkeepers watched the street longer than usual. Even the saloons, normally loud before noon, carried an edge of restraint. Word traveled quickly that the cowboys were armed again, drinking heavily and refusing to leave town. This time they were not hiding their intentions. The cowboys gathered near the OK Corral were not there by accident. Ike Clanton had been making threats all night, loudly declaring that the Earps would be dead before the day was over. He had been drinking hard, his anger fueled by humiliation and pride. The McClory brothers, Tom and Frank, were calmer but no less dangerous. Unlike Ike, they were disciplined fighters, experienced with firearms, and fully aware of what defying the law meant. Together, they represented something larger than themselves. They were daring the town to prove whether the law still existed or not. Virgil Earp received multiple reports that morning. The cowboys were armed in violation of the city ordinance. They had ignored repeated warnings. They were refusing to disarm or leave town. Every option had been exhausted except one. Virgil understood the weight of the moment with painful clarity. If he failed to act now, the ordinance would become meaningless. The badge would become a joke. Tombstone would no longer be governed by law, but by whichever man carried the biggest gun and the strongest reputation for violence. This was not about ego, it was not personal, it was duty. Virgil gathered Wyatt, Morgan, and Doc Holliday. There were no speeches, no dramatic planning. Each man understood what was at stake. They had all seen what happened when lawmen hesitated. They knew the cost of stepping aside. They also knew the cost of stepping forward. This was not courage born of confidence, it was courage born of necessity. As they began walking down Fremont Street, the atmosphere changed. Conversations stopped. People stepped back into doorways, windows filled with faces watching silently. The four men moved with purpose, coats heavy, weapons concealed but ready. Virgil walked slightly ahead, the badge visible on his chest. Wyatt stayed close, alert, scanning every movement. Morgan followed, calm but focused. Holliday carried a shotgun hidden beneath his coat, the weight of it steadying his resolve. We're not marching toward glory. They were walking toward uncertainty. Wyatt Earp understood the psychology of the moment better than anyone. The cowboys believed intimidation was strength. They believed that if they could force the law to blink, they would own Tombstone forever. Intimidation only works when fear goes unanswered. Wyatt knew that standing firm, even for a moment, could change everything. Behind the OK Corral, the narrow lot waited. It was not a dramatic battlefield. There were no wide streets, no open ground, no place to retreat, just a tight space between buildings, dirt underfoot, and barely enough room to draw a weapon. The closeness made everything more dangerous. One mistake would be fatal. When the two sides finally faced each other, The distance between them was shockingly small. Hands hovered inches from revolvers. Eyes locked. Every man present knew that once the first shot was fired, there would be no turning back. Words were exchanged, sharp and final. But history would never agree on exactly what was said. What mattered was not the words, but the decision that had already been made. Time seemed to slow, then the gunfire exploded. Shots rang out almost simultaneously, so close together that witnesses later struggled to separate one from another. Smoke filled the narrow lot instantly. Horses screamed and reared. Bullets ripped through coats, flesh, and wood. The sound was deafening, violent, and chaotic. Men fired at point-blank range, instincts taking over where thought could no longer keep up. The entire gunfight lasted less than 30 seconds. In that brief span, lives were ended and history was rewritten. Billy Clanton was struck repeatedly, desperately firing even as he fell. Tom McClory was shot down near his horse. Frank McClory fought fiercely, wounded but still standing until the final shots dropped him to the dirt. Virgil Earp was hit early, a bullet tearing through his leg. Morgan Earp was wounded as well, pain ripping through him as he continued to fight. Doc Holliday emerged from the smoke like a force of nature, his shotgun roaring at close range. And Wyatt Earp remained standing, untouched by danger but untouched by bullets, calm in the chaos, focused while others fell. Later, Wyatt would say that he never felt fear in that moment, that once the shooting started, there was no space left for it. He was not thinking about survival. He was thinking about stopping the threat in front of him. When the smoke cleared, the reality of what had happened settled heavily over the lot. 3 cowboys lay dead or dying. The Earps were wounded, but alive. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Tombstone had crossed a line it could never return from. Law had stood, but standing came at a cost. Almost immediately, the narrative began to turn. The cowboys were dead, but their allies were not. Accusations spread quickly. The Earps were called murderers, executioners, tyrants hiding behind badges. Newspapers seized on the story, printing exaggerated accounts that painted the lawmen as villains. The town that had watched in silence now whispered with doubt and fear. Virgil and Wyatt were arrested. Hearings were scheduled. Testimony dragged on for weeks. Every decision made behind the OK Corral was dissected, questioned, and twisted. The Earps were forced to defend not just their actions, but the very idea that the law had the right to enforce itself. Wyatt watched carefully as public opinion shifted. He saw how quickly people forgot the fear they had lived under, how easily they questioned the men who had stood when no one else would. He learned a hard truth in those weeks. Law is never loved, only tolerated and often resented when it does its job. Judge ultimately ruled that the Earps had acted within the law. The ordinance had been clear. The cowboys had ignored it. The confrontation, though deadly, was justified. It should have been the end, only the beginning. Boys wanted revenge, not justice, not answers, revenge, and they were willing to wait. As Tombstone tried to return to normal, the tension did not fade. It deepened. Threats resumed, quieter now but more dangerous. The Earps knew they were being watched, followed, marked. The town felt smaller, tighter, more hostile with every passing day. Wyatt Earp understood something was coming. He could feel it. The gunfight had settled nothing permanently. It had simply shifted the balance, and those who had lost power would not accept that loss quietly. Question was no longer whether violence would return. It was when it did, it would be. They thought the gunfight was the end. They were wrong. The OK Corral did not bring peace to Tombstone. It lit a few. The weeks that followed, the town felt cursed. The air was heavier. Smiles disappeared. Men checked over their shoulders before stepping into the street. The cowboys had lost 3 of their own, but what they lost in numbers, they replaced with rage. And rage in the Old West was far more dangerous than guns. Wyatt Earp knew it before the first attack came. He could sense it in the way conversation stopped when he entered a room, in the way strangers stared too long, in the way Tombstone, once loud and reckless, became quiet and hostile. The badge protected nothing now. It painted a target. Virgil Earp paid the first price. On the night of December 28, 1881, Virgil was walking down Allen Street returning from a saloon. It was late. The street was dimly lit, and it was quiet. Too quiet. Darkness ahead, a shotgun roared. The blast shattered the night. Pellets tore into Virgil's back and arm, ripping through muscle and bone. He collapsed instantly, screaming in pain. Virgil survived, but his career as a lawman did not. The attack crippled him permanently. His left arm would never function again. For the cowboys, it was a message. The fight wasn't over. For Wyatt, it was a warning. This wasn't random violence. This was organized revenge. Worse was coming. Tombstone's so-called justice system did nothing. No arrests, no convictions, no protection. The same town that demanded order now looked away as the men who enforced it were hunted like animals. He hardened into something cold inside him. The law had limits, and those limits were being tested. Then came the breaking point. On March 18, 1882, Morgan Earp was playing billiards at Campbell and Hatch's saloon. It was early evening. The room was familiar, safe, or so it seemed. As Morgan lined up his shot, a bullet tore through a window, slammed into his back, and exited his chest. He collapsed instantly. Wyatt caught him as he fell and died within minutes. Wyatt did not cry. He did not scream. He did not collapse. Witnesses said his face went blank, as if something inside him had shut off forever. The lawman was still standing, but the man was gone. That night, something changed in Wyatt Earp. Up until that moment, he had believed in restraint. In courts, in warrants, in due process. Morgan's blood washed those beliefs away. The cowboys had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. This was no longer about Tombstone, no longer about ordinances or badges. Wyatt promised his dying brother that Morgan's killers would not escape. Not through trials, not through delays, not through cowardice. They would be found, and they would pay. The vendetta ride had begun. Wyatt was still acting under the authority of the law, deputized by federal marshals. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. This was not justice as the courts defined it. This was frontier justice, fast, brutal, and final. Wyatt assembled a small group of men he trusted absolutely: Doc Holliday, Sherman McMaster, Turkey Creek Jack Johnson, Texas Jack Vermillion, men who understood that once this road was taken, there was no turning back. They rode out of Tombstone with Morgan's body, putting it to the train that would take him home. But the journey became a hunt. Their first target was Frank Stillwell. Stillwell was suspected of involvement in Morgan's murder. When Wyatt spotted him near the railroad tracks in Tucson, there was no hesitation, no warning, no arrest. Stillwell was chased down and shot repeatedly at close range. His body was left riddled with bullets. Wyatt did not deny it. He did not apologize. He sent a message. The cowboys understood immediately. This was not the Wyatt Earp they thought they knew. This man was colder, sharper, unburdened by doubt. Each death would be answered, fully. Over the next several weeks, the vendetta ride cut through southern Arizona like a storm. Men associated with the cowboys disappeared. Some were found dead, others fled. Rumors spread faster than facts. Wyatt Earp became something larger than life. To some, a hero delivering justice where the courts failed. To others, a killer abusing his power. Little. He rode hard. He spoke less with every passing day. The fear that once belonged to Tombstone now followed the cowboys. They never knew where he would appear, or when, or who would be next. One of the most infamous encounters came at Iron Springs. Wyatt's group rode into an ambush set by Curly Bill Brocius, one of the most dangerous cowboy leaders. Shots erupted from behind rocks and brush. The situation was desperate, but Wyatt did not retreat. Under heavy fire, Wyatt rode straight toward Curly Bill. At close range, he raised his shotgun and fired. The blast struck Curly Bill in the chest, nearly tearing him apart. His death shattered what remained of cowboy leadership. It was unmistakable. This was not survival anymore, this was dominance. But even legends pay a price. As Wyatt's reputation grew, so did the pressure. Warrants were issued. Newspapers across the country condemned him. The line between lawman and outlaw blurred beyond recognition. Wyatt Earp, once a symbol of order, was now a man hunted by the very system he once served. Eventually, the vendetta ride ended not with victory, but exhaustion. The cowboys were broken, scattered, or dead. But Wyatt could not return to Tombstone. There was no home left there. Only ghosts left Arizona behind. Behind him lay blood, vengeance, and a reputation carved into American history. Ahead of him lay uncertainty, exile, and the slow realization that justice, once taken into your own hands, never truly lets go. Wyatt Earp had won the fight, but the cost had been everything. And his story was not finished yet. By the time Wyatt Earp left Arizona, he was no longer just a man. He was a symbol, forged in blood, controversy, and fire. The newspapers followed him wherever he went. Some called him a hero, others a murderer hiding behind a badge. But none could ignore his name. In a country still defining what justice truly meant, Wyatt Earp stood at the center of that question, daring America to look straight at itself. He traveled west, away from Tombstone, away from the graves of his brothers, away from the streets where law had failed him. Colorado, California, Alaska, everywhere he went, his reputation arrived before he did. Doors opened, eyes watched, men whispered. Some wanted to shake his hand, others wanted him dead. But Wyatt Earp did not chase glory. He'd loss. The West he had fought for was disappearing. Railroads were spreading. Towns were becoming cities. The frontier, wild, brutal, unforgiving, was slowly being tamed, and men like Wyatt Earp were becoming relics of a violent, complicated past. Yet America would not let him fade. In the early 1900s, a new force was rising: Hollywood. Filmmakers were desperate for stories larger than life, stories that felt uniquely American. And no name echoed louder from the Old West than Wyatt Earp. Directors sought him out. Writers listened to him speak. Actors studied his posture, his voice, his calm confidence. Wyatt, now older and slower, watched as his life transformed into legend. Some details were exaggerated, others softened. Heroes were made cleaner, villains more obvious. But the core of the story remained unchanged. When chaos ruled, Wyatt Earp stood his ground. He had not been perfect. He had not always been kind. He had crossed lines that haunted him. But he had never been weak, and he had never run. That is why his story endured. Gunfight at the OK Corral was not remembered because of its length. It lasted less than 30 seconds. It was remembered because of what it represented. 4 men stood against a lawless force and refused to back down. Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, but because someone had to draw the line. That idea became part of America's DNA. Generations later, Americans would still look back at the Old West and see something powerful there. Resilience, self-reliance, courage under pressure. The belief that when systems fail, character matters. That when the odds are stacked, standing your ground still means something. Wyatt Earp lived long enough to see his name become immortal. He died in 1929, not in a blaze of gunfire, but quietly, in his bed, at the age of 80. For a man who had stared death in the face more times than most could imagine, there was something fitting about that ending. He had survived the West itself, but his legacy did not die with him. This day, Wyatt Earp stands as one of the most complex figures in American history. Lawman and outlaw, hero and avenger. A man shaped by a brutal world who, in turn, shaped it back. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths: that justice is rarely clean, that courage often comes with consequences, and that freedom has always demanded a price. And yet, despite all the controversy, one truth remains undeniable. When Tombstone stood on the edge of chaos, when fear ruled the streets and when others hesitated, Earp stepped forward. That is why his name is remembered. That is why his story is told. That is why the Old West still lives in the American heart, not as a fairy tale, but as a reminder of who Americans were forced to become, so the nation could become what it is today. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the strength, sacrifice, and resilience that built this country, take a moment to honor that legacy. Leave a like to show respect for those who stood their ground. Subscribe to keep these real American stories alive, and comment below. Believe Wyatt Earp was a hero, a villain, or something in between. Because history is not just something we remember, it's something we choose to. The story of the Old West is far from over.